channel in the last 6 hours?
There's been a lot of stuff posted today. Today and yesterday, there was a lot of stuff posted.
Yeah, and there were a couple of the things that were posted were from the service learning people, and there's been some really cool PowerPoint presentations that were posted too.
So for the journal, so the overall theme is human interaction with the environment or their environment. It's pretty broad.
Yeah, it is super broad. And the trick with something like that is you can make almost anything work if you frame it in language that is reasonable and professional that sounds like it ties into the theme. Because the reality is you can't exist as a human without interacting with your environment.
Right.
You know, you're interacting. And so that finding how to articulate that in a way that sounds consistent with the call to action from the journal, that's going to be the trick.
And is there like prizes if you're selected, or is it just like a general call for all students to get their work published?
I think that there will most likely be a crisp high five. But other than that, I think it's just a personal satisfaction that you get your name in print.
So
But
it
it is
will actually be printed. It won't be an online thing like the last art show.
this isn't. It is supposed to be a journal. It is supposed to be a once a year magazine, and there are both online and print components. I believe that they will have a print version of it that you can actually get, as well as at least the highlights online. I don't know an awful lot more than that. I would recommend going through that email and trying to link to previous journals, see if you can find what they've done with previous journals. And that's probably going to be the model that they'll keep using.
Okay.
So that's my suspicion for this year. Next year, it most likely will change, but I'm thinking that's what it is this year. All right, Delane, I've never seen you without your mask. I can't believe you have a mouth. I thought it was, one of those Matrix things.
Nice, that's funny.
Well, it just makes you wonder when Neo's like that. How does he drink? You know, have you guys? Has anybody ever seen Matrix? Once a year, I make a mental pilgrimage to watch all four of there's three live action movies and there's one collection of animation. And when you start at like 11:30 in the morning after depriving yourself of sleep for a day, it is remarkable the kind of experience you have. All right, let's see. Is James here? I think I'm going to call roll twice. I'm going to do it once now and then again in about 10 minutes. Is Sage here?
Sage Gurney is here.
Excellent. How about Hazel?
I'm here.
All right. Hayden?
I'm here.
All right. Emily?
I am here.
Emery? How about Brinley?
I'm here.
Cassidy?
Right here.
Okay. Kahiana? How about Taylor?
Here.
Sage Sagers? Okay. Mr. Silva? How about Karen Tanoko?
I'm here.
All righty. Keely?
I'm here.
And Hillary?
I'm here.
Excellent. There's been a couple things. I said the last opportunity to present was our last time we met together, but there's been a number of people that have had a really difficult time uploading their videos. I was having people send me the file so I could put a title on it, put it in, and a couple people just put it on their own YouTube channel and then send me the link, which is not super problematic. We still got it done. But is there anybody that is having real issues getting the film to work, getting the video to work? Okay. And I think one person had spoken about, had told me that the person who had they interviewed did not want it to be on YouTube. And I'm wondering if that person can edit the interview out or if they would like to show the PowerPoint just in class. And then we won't put it on YouTube if the guy doesn't want to be on YouTube. Would that be a possibility?
I mean, I can do either one, whatever we have time for. So I know we're
Okay.
probably pressed for time today, so I can
Yeah.
just edit it. And it's no
All
problem.
right. I'd appreciate that. That's okay. The interview was really cool, guys, so you'll miss out tremendously. But you'll live the rest of your life missing a piece that you never knew you had, so it won't be too bad. I wanted to ask, I have my arm stretched out because I have the little grade book here and I'm making marks by everybody's name according to participation. So everybody's going to have to answer something and participate. And when you do, make sure that I know your name so I can mark it down. And this is what the final is going to be like. We're going to talk about what is the difference with 3D compared to the work that you normally do. We're going to talk briefly about the benefits of doing the research project and the benefits of doing the service learning. There are benefits to both. And then one by one, everybody is going to just say something about the best success that they had and then the biggest challenge that they had during the class. There's about 16 people that we can expect to hear from. So actually about 14 people that we will probably hear from. And which means that everybody is going to have about 3 to 5 minutes or so to discuss that last question. And I would like for the first two questions, first difference with 3D, and then the second question, benefit of research and service, I would like about 8 people to address each of those so that we hear from different people. So whoever answers what is different with 3D doesn't have to answer benefit of research or service learning, but everybody will have to talk about their favorite success and their biggest challenge. Does that make sense to everybody? And the first answer is going to just be 1 to 2 minutes, no diatribes, no monologues, and the second answer is going to be 3 to 5 minutes at the most. All right? So we will start, and if I don't hear anybody jumping in, I'll just start randomly calling names. So for the first one, all of you guys, this is the thing that really impresses me about UVU, is in the classes that I've taught over the last couple of years, every student has had professional experience, which that right there sets you apart from most of the visual arts schools around the country. And I think that that's pretty remarkable. But I would like 8 people to talk to the question, what is different with what you normally do and 3D? Just from the experience that you've had during this short time that we've had together.
Is that with like the style of the class or just working with the media of like 3D?
Working with media and exploring the dimensionality of the media.
Okay. Well, I can start off on that if that's all right with you.
And what's your name?
Brinley Sloat.
Okay.
I think something that I found really interesting about 3D work is that you really have to rethink about structural support. like in painting and stuff like that, it doesn't matter about structure, but in 3D art, I'm always like, oh, I have this big thing that I want to do, and then when it comes down to it, it can't even stand up on its own. So you have to like kind of rethink that and make sure that it's like structurally sound so that it can be presented in the way that you're thinking. I think it was also really interesting doing the carving and like trying to work that out in your brain and knowing where to cut without like cutting off an arm or something like that while you're doing that. I think that was a real challenge to try and figure out that where to cut. And when you're thinking about just doing the head, you have to think about the whole rest of the piece as well, so you don't sever anything off.
So structural support and thinking things through all the way, basically, right?
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
All right, that's really good. Number 2, who would like to go next?
I can go.
All right.
So the biggest thing that I noticed this semester working with 3D pieces was probably the setting. I mean, with 2D pieces of art, the setting can actually make a big difference as well where it's presented. But with 3D pieces, I've noticed we looked at a lot of pieces that actually interacted with the space and the setting and the atmosphere that it was in, and there were some pieces that we looked at where the negative space was kind of filled in by the background of the setting, and just like it can have a lot of impact on how you view the piece and the kind of just the kind of impact that it can have is the setting.
So a really big awareness of the physical context. All right, that's a good one. Number 3.
I will go.
And what's your name?
Emily Lane.
All righty.
So my favorite medium is always the 2D medium, especially digital art. And taking this course and working with 3D mediums has been a really interesting experience. I find it interesting that, like Delaney said, how it interacts with the space around it. Unlike 2D art, 3D art has multiple dimensions and can interact where there is nothing, where there is space. And I never realized how much empty space or the space around these works of art affected the art itself.
Yeah, and I think tying in with that, it affects how people interact with the art, how they think about it quite a bit. Yeah, that's a really good observation. Number 4.
I'll go. Oh, you can go ahead. Okay. This is Taylor, by the way.
Okay.
So I kind of mentioned before, I think with 3D art, there is a lot more, I don't want to say a lot more planning involved, because definitely with 2D art, there's a lot of planning and prepping for that. But I think with 3D art, it's more hands-on. Like I found myself throughout the semester with my various projects that I did, like needing to hold things a certain way as I assembled them, whereas 2D, it's just it's flat, and you have a paintbrush and at least for me, I do watercolor, so it's just painting and not so interactive with my hands and things like that.
So you're saying it almost became it became a physical activity, pretty much, having to think about coordinating just the physicality of what you were working on.
Right, yeah. And I think, for example, the skin and structure project, that took a lot of planning and reassembling to make it stand the way I wanted it to. Whereas with 2D, when I'm painting, if I don't like something, I can simply dab that color out if needed and repaint over it. But with 3D, I almost had to unassemble my project and reassemble it to make it stand the way I envisioned it.
That's something that is a constant sort of source of frustration for me. Exactly what you're talking about. A lot of the work that I do, if I do a sculpture, and I can spend anywhere from 80 to 150 hours on something. And what's really frustrating, getting to that point where 80 hours in, I realized that I had started from a mistake and I need to start all over again. And that can be really painful. But yeah, I think that was nice of you to bring up those kinds of memories for me. That was really, thanks. But no, but your observation, I think, is really a sound one. And I think it goes back to that constant interactive dance almost between you and whatever it is you're working on, and a constant awareness. So very good. Number 5.
I'll go now. So I actually primarily do 3D, but that with ceramic sculpture.
Oh,
but it's what we did this semester is quite different than just working with ceramics. So with like ceramics, it kind of have the same process each time I'd create a piece, which is sketching it, thinking about the armature, like the way working with the material is always the same. And the process is pretty consistent. Whereas like in this semester, each of the different pieces we did, they're all 3D, but they all required very different processes and different just like perspective and kind of the way your mind works, I guess. So like, for instance, like the carved biomorphic abstraction is not a lot of planning, and it's more doing and like feeling it as you're going, versus like Taylor was talking about, the structure and skin. It's a lot of like building and rebuilding, where obviously that's not happening with the carved biomorphic. And then, or something like the wire, which took like, at least for me, that was a significant amount of planning first, and then just executing it. So I guess my point is that the different mediums, the process of making them and the mindset that you need to have is very different compared to ceramics.
Yeah, I think that's a really good observation, and it's different for every medium, I think, pretty much. Even if they're really similar, it's going to be a different process. So that's a really good observation. Let's see, number 6.
I can go now.
All right, and what's your name?
I'm Hazel.
All right.
What I noticed, sorry.
Go for it.
What I noticed the most was the importance of material choice. Because like with 2D art, you draw on a piece of paper with a pencil or graphite or with paint, and it doesn't matter too much. Like, they have different effects. But with 3D art, the material you work with really differs depending on what you want, like both meaning wise, like the meaning you choose for each object, as well as functionality, how cardboard crumbles easily under pressure, whereas metal or wood would support it more. So I think that's what really stood out to me this semester.
I think that's a really good observation too. And I'm starting to hear 2 different themes going on. One is a real connection with the materials and their use, and another is a real connection with the process of planning and building. And I think that's really fascinating to me. How about number 7? Who'd like to be number 7?
I'll be number 7.
Okay, and you are Hayden?
Yeah.
All
So
right.
something that I noticed when I started out in the class is I usually do a lot of like 2D art, drawing or digital. And when I moved over to 3D, I had to be more aware of just like X and Y axis. When using 2D, I had to use X, Y, and Z axis now, length, width, and height. And something about 2D is like I can draw something to try to give it a specific texture. But Whereas in 3D, I was encouraged to use like actual real items and objects to create the exact type of texture that I wanted. Specifically, like with the texture tiles. Like if I wanted to make a dirty dirt-like texture, I could use the actual thing. Whereas in 2D, I would usually be trying to draw and convey that.
That's a really good observation too. Now, my question for you is, which is easier?
I guess it depends on what I'm trying to make. But I would say, from my experience, 3D design seems to be a little bit easier, at least when it comes to making some texture.
All right, very cool. Excellent. That does it for that question. And moving on, let me get it. I'm gonna do roll call again, just with the people that hopefully joined us a little late. Is James here?
Yes, yeah, I'm here. My bad.
All right. How about Emery? Is she here? Kahiana? Sage Sagers? Michael? Okay. So going to the next question. And this is for everybody that did not answer that first question. What are the benefits of doing the research project or the service learning project? How did doing that expand your awareness of your relationship with art, art in general, and what was possible? Who would like to go first with that?
I'll go
I
first.
could
Oh, or Keely can go. Keely, you can go first.
Okay. So one thing that I really enjoyed, so I did the research project, and I always really like doing research on a specific artist because I'm able to really delve into like the psychology behind their choices and really what makes their art interesting. And my artist is James Turrell, and he did light as his 3D medium and architecture. And so it was actually a really cool experience because I had never really realized that you could use light as like a art medium, you know? And I don't know, it just kind of opened my eyes to like all the different possibilities that could be an art experience. And with every artist that I've done a research project with, it's incredible to see how they grow in their process, how like they start with one idea and then they end with a completely different idea and process. And it kind of gives me hope for my own artistic growth and understanding through my own life that like, you know, what I'm doing right now is not necessarily what I'm going to be doing in 10 years or, you know, 30 years. So it's actually a really cool thing to study and learn about so that I too can learn that, you know, I'm constantly changing.
All right, very good. Who would like to go next?
I'll go.
All right.
For me, it was really good to do artist research because it gave me a perspective of possibility. I guess the possibility of me being able to make money from doing art. And what I mean by that is I was able to see how Tom Allen's illustration and sculpture work, because paper cutouts, has been featured in so many large magazines, and he's been able to work under different art directors and things like that. And so learning about where his work has been featured was really helpful for me to see just the possibilities of where my work could potentially end up as well, so I can not starve. And also just learning about the perspective of how to work with different magazines or publications as a freelancer, and kind of like what the struggles are when there are difficult clients and things like that. And so really just like the more practical side of being an artist and making that work was really helpful for me to get a different perspective on through the research.
I think that's a really good, just a practical perspective. That's something that I think is an ongoing issue. Most of the time, universities judge the success of a particular department by how much or what the income level is of the initial jobs people have after they graduate. And that is true for every department historically, except for philosophy, humanities, and arts in several universities. I don't know if there's a study on that. That's just my observation. But I like that perspective that you give, because I think your artist is a pretty good person to look at to learn that kind of a thing. So that's a really good answer. Who would like to go third?
I can go third.
I can go.
What's your name?
Sage Gurney. For me, it was really nice. I did the research, and it was really nice to study one artist really in depthly, because I feel like throughout my life, I only like get told about artists very briefly. I get like an overview, but this was different, where I was really able to like go in there and figure out about them, see all of their work, see their process and how it's changed over the years and all that kind of stuff. And it was very helpful to see that, because I feel like it helped my process and the way I approach my work. And I feel like it was a lot more helpful to get inspired by other artists by going in depth than just getting an overview like I have in the past.
Well, that's really good. I don't think it would be good to make anybody do a research project on more than one artist in the semester. I think that's an awful lot to take, but I think it's really valuable to take a minute and look at everybody else's research that they've done. As I'm learning things as I'm watching people's PowerPoint presentations, and I really appreciate that insight that you just shared. So very nice. All right, who would like to go next?
I can go next.
And what's your name?
Karen. So I did the research project, and something that I benefited from doing it was kind of seeing like the behind the scenes of certain artworks. For example, I did Jean-Claude and Christo, and there was this one thing so they did the Pont Neuf wrapped. It's like the bridge, and it took them 10 years to do it, which I would have never known. And it took so long just because they had to get all these like types of permits and permission. So I thought that was really interesting, seeing like how long things take.
Well, a lot of people don't know, but Jean-Claude and Christo as well, people generally did not pay them to do that stuff. They would have to get grants. And sometimes the grant process can be, painfully long. And so, yeah, it's a testament to their capacity for endurance, I think. So, yeah, that's really good. All right, who would like to go next?
I can go.
Okay, and you are?
Alyssa. All right. I think the thing that was nice for me was being in school and kind of like going through the required classes that aren't quite getting into like what you're majoring for or planning to go into. It gets kind of like, am I really doing what I'm wanting to do? Is this what, I'm just doing something, I'm taking these art history classes, or like, I don't really, I love the 3D art, but that's not what I'm great at. It's not what I want to do. And so being able to do the service learning project and kind of choose what format I did it in was really cool to remind me like, okay, yeah, this is the major that I want to be a part of. Like, this is what I want to do. And learning how to apply the things that we learned in the 3D design class to, you know, photography for what I did and graphic design. Because there's principles that we learned here and that still apply both ways. You know what I'm saying? And so, yeah, I guess that's kind of like the thing I learned the most and that I liked the most about it was remembering like, this is what I want to do, and I really enjoy this major. I really enjoy what I'm doing, and I am able to recognize like it is important that I take 3D design because the things I'm learning here still apply to what I'm eventually going to be doing for a career.
That's a really good observation. It reminds me of something I was frustrated, I think in a similar way, going through school, having to take these classes that had nothing to do with what I was interested in. And my mom at one point said, sometimes you just have to put on your big girl panties and suck it up and do it anyway. And that's always kind of stuck in the back of my head, because sometimes in order to get to where you want to be, you have to do the things that you don't think are necessarily connected. And then you realize later on, perhaps that they were. So I think that's a really good observation. What was you did the yearbook, right?
I helped a color guard.
That's
yearbook
right.
Stuff. That was, yeah.
Okay, yeah, you helped the color guard. Okay, yeah, that's very cool. All right, thank you. Now we're down to James and Cassidy. Which of you would like to go first?
I'll just go first.
Okay.
So could you repeat the question at least for me real quick?
Okay, what was the benefit of doing the in-depth research or the service learning?
For me, doing the research really like opened my perspective on like because the artists I use use a plethora of different mediums when at least for me personally, I'm used to using just like one form of medium, which is just graphite and sometimes paint. And the artist I like researched on, which I'm like Steve Tobin, he used like a ton of mediums, which is clay, glass, metal, like a ton of things. So it opened up my mind to like look at using other things and like getting textures from different forms of mediums as well, at least in my opinion.
So your research helped to expand your awareness of the materials that you use.
Yes.
All right, excellent. How about Cassidy?
Yeah, so for me, I did the service learning project, and it was really awesome to be able to get to like work with an actual like person, an actual client. And so I learned a lot from that. And also, for my project, I made some flyers for a group that a neighbor of mine runs. And it was also really nice for me because I have a friend who's also studying sort of digital media stuff. She knows a lot more about kind of making posters than I do. So I was able to get her help sort of to clean up the final project and figure out, you know, what I'm doing wrong, what I can do better. And so I learned a lot from her as well.
Well, that's really cool. And I can't remember the particular organization, but you had to basically take their visual language that they had already started developing and turn it into a flyer for their specific programs, right?
Yes. Yeah, they gave me a flyer that I had been using for years, and like it was good, it got the point across, but it was a simple flyer that someone with very little design experience had made in Word, and you could tell. So I just kind of took it and made it, you know, nice, a little bit better, a little bit cleaner, all that jazz.
All right, excellent. Now, for this last question, we can do it one of two ways. And and thank you for everybody that answered those two questions. This third question, what was the biggest success? What was the the biggest challenge, we can either go around and everybody address the challenge first and then go around again and address the successes, or each person can talk about both. You know, what would you guys like to do? It's, of course, it's a choice between two boring alternatives, but still, I'm giving you an opportunity to make a choice.
I think
both would be interesting, personally.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was gonna say I think it'd be interesting to see like all the disadvantages and then the advantages, just to see if anyone relates, because I think if I were to do both of mine and everyone were to do both, I'd kind of forget what people said.
Okay.
I agree with Taylor.
All right. Let's go around then and have everybody address their biggest challenge first, and then we'll go back and have everybody talk about their biggest success. So let's start with just people initiating their own comments, and then after that dries up a little bit, I will call on the rest. So who wants to talk about their biggest challenge first?
I can go.
Okay. And what's your name?
So, Keely.
All right.
So, I have never really worked with 3D objects except for when I was like a child. And so, building these materials has been a big challenge, especially because I've never been really one to build things with my hands. Like, I feel really clumsy with it. And so, with like the assignment that was probably the most difficult, would probably be the carving, just because of like the amount of time and effort that went into creating that. Even though I am like pleased with like the results and how it turned out, even if it may not be perfect, but I just have to keep reminding myself that it's a beginning piece. So anyway, so that's just been the greatest challenge for me. It's just working with brand new materials.
I like that perspective, but do you guys remember what I had to say about perfection at the beginning? Does anybody remember that? Perfection is not robot-like appearance. Perfection is found in honesty and trying to push yourself, but being aware of who you are at present. And so the piece that you've made, whatever those pieces are, if you're honest with what you've done and you put in the effort, they're the very best that you've done ever in the history of the planet. It's the first time you've ever done it. And if it's not exactly the way that you had expected it to be, that may not be as important as the fact that you did it honestly. And so that's where perfection is. A little bit of a side tangent, but I think that when you do the very best that you can do, whether or not somebody else appreciates it, you are still tapping on the door of that idea of perfection. But who would like to go next? What was your biggest challenge?
I can go next.
Okay.
This is Taylor again.
All right.
I think, are we just doing like our biggest challenge with
Right.
the semester, or with specifically like 3D design?
Specifically with 3D design, but a lot of the times that can echo from the biggest challenge of the semester as well.
Gotcha. I think for me, it was just the time and preparation to get the piece that you wanted. Kind of like I mentioned before, like in my other answer, but like I didn't expect it to take as long as it did. And so finding the time to sit down and do it was really challenging, because I'm pretty busy. Like my life, I have a pretty full schedule. So to find the time to do and to do the projects and get creative with the projects and get in that zone that you mentioned like at the beginning of the year. I think that was the biggest challenge because sometimes I'd have to put it down and come back, and I didn't really love that because I didn't feel like I was using my full creativity when I'd have to come back and forth to it.
Yeah, and I think that can be a real challenge, especially when you only have relatively small bites of time to work on it. It can be a challenge to kind of force that that mind space that you need to be in. So yeah, that's a good thing to talk about. Who would like to go next? Your biggest challenge.
I can go next.
I can go.
Okay, who spoke? Is it Brinley?
Yeah, I can go if that's all right.
Sure.
So mine was the same thing, was time. I think it was really hard for me to, one, find the time to work on the piece, and then two, when I was working on the piece, I just wanted to put more and more time into it. I was like, it's not quite perfect yet. And so I think I had a hard time like pulling back from going over the hours because I just wanted it to convey what was in my head. I think another thing that was a little bit hard with working with these materials is like, especially for the carved biomorphic abstraction, the material is just so messy and you actually have to do it in a studio instead of like being able to do it at like 3 o'clock in the morning when I usually do the rest of my homework, you know? So I had to like kind of plan around that and make time to actually do it in the studio where we had all the materials instead of just when it was a little bit more convenient for my creativity schedule, you know?
No, and I think that's a really good point too. You probably wouldn't make a lot of friends with your roommates if you took out your hammer and chisel and started carving at 3 o'clock in the morning. So yeah, that's
yeah.
Planning.
They need that.
All right, who's next?
I can go.
Okay. And you are?
Sage Gurney. For me, the hardest part was the fact that I've never done anything like this before, and so each project was something new. So there was a lot of uncertainty when I was making each project because I was like, I've never done anything like this before. I don't know if I'm doing it right. I don't know if this is actually going to turn out. And it also made it like hard to plan out what to do because I didn't really know where to start. So I felt like a huge learning curve and a lot of anxiety with each project that I did.
Yeah, that can be definitely scary. So I think that's a really good observation. Who's next?
I'll go.
Okay,
This
Hillary.
is Hillary, yeah. Quite simply, the hardest thing was the carved biomorphic abstraction, but I'll talk about something else instead. I think one thing that was difficult were some of the constraints. And I looked at them as constraints, and by that I mean like the medium to use and the size or the subject matter or that kind of thing. I looked at them at constraints until I watched this TED Talk. I don't know if anyone has seen it. It's called Embrace the Shake. But it's really good TED Talk, just talking about creativity coming from a place of more creativity coming from a place of kind of limitation. So after I watched that, I kind of changed my mindset about it. I think, and I haven't been in a school in a while, so the art I've been creating has been just kind of like whatever I want to do. But approaching it with those constraints and it kind of embracing it shifted my mindset. And I think my work later in the course reflected that, just a bit more creativity.
All right, excellent. Yeah, sometimes it can be a real struggle when you're required to do something and the medium just does not want to do what you want it to do. That can really be, I'm glad you were able to find a way around that. Who would like to go next?
I'll go.
All right.
And jumping off of your comment, the hardest thing for me was cooking 3 dozen eggs and trying to coat a wire chicken with them. Um, that was a challenge just because apparently eggs are a very difficult medium to work with if you're ever considering using them in the future. Don't do it. But I guess just in a broad sense, just materials in general, trying to figure out how forgiving plaster is, or exactly what you can do with cardboard was a challenge just because I'm so used to being able to hit undo, and you can't undo with eggs.
That's true. And it's going to stay, just like company, in a couple days, it's going to start smelling bad.
It was gross. It was disgusting.
All right, that good observation. Who's next?
I can go.
Okay.
So definitely the biggest struggle for me was the wire sculpture. This was a lot of firsts for me this semester. I'm really used to working mostly on paper and digital media, so the wire sculpture was really hard for me. I actually had 4 different objects that I tried working on, and just none of them I could really get them to be in the shapes that I wanted them to be, and it was just really frustrating. But the line section was probably my favorite, though, looking at the line sculptures that we saw and how people were able to create such just these forms and contours and emotions with using just lines was pretty amazing. So I feel like I learned a lot in that section for sure.
All right. So, and you said that was also the biggest challenge, working with that.
Yeah, for sure. Just making those forms in 3D was such a struggle for me. So I was really impressed by the people who are able to do that well.
All right. Excellent. Good observation. Who would like to be next? Biggest challenge. We are halfway through.
So for me, I had a really hard time with the wire sculpture too, specifically. And I had this vision in my head of and I think that was my problem, is I always had a vision of what I wanted things to look like when they were done. And it really hindered me from being able to be successful because I was trying so hard to force something that didn't want to be there. And so that really held me back, I think, in a lot of the things I did, and the wire sculpture being one. Like, I wanted it to end up a certain way, but I just couldn't figure out how to do it to get it there. And nothing I was doing was successful, and I couldn't figure out how to make it stand up on its own. And so that's one that I really remember that affecting me a lot on, was trying to force so hard something that I wanted to happen, but it didn't want to happen that way. And I think that's the thing as an artist, is you have to be able to move with your medium and let the medium speak to you as well as you speak with the medium. It's kind of a relationship between the two.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of looking at it. I like that idea of developing it as a relationship. So very good. Who would like to go next?
I'll go next.
All right. Hayden?
Yep.
Okay.
I had a similar experience as well with the wire sculptures. When I first started that project, I tried making 2 different sculptures, but failed miserably at them. It wasn't until the 3rd one where I finally got it. And basically, I needed to create like a base or a foundation to build everything else on top of. Because everything else I had made before was pretty weak and flimsy and had a hard time staying up. Whereas with my final one, the dolphin, I was able to create sort of like a skeleton to kind of keep everything upheld and to be more sturdy. And I think that kind of affected my work in the later projects, specifically like the structure with skin, where I pretty much applied the same thing that I learned from the wire sculpture.
All right, good. Who would like to go next?
I'll go next. So,
Emily.
yeah, Emily.
All right.
So the most difficult thing for me was keeping in mind throughout all the projects, basically, is that they're 3-dimensional, that you have to look at them from every angle for it to understand. While we were doing the carving, while I was outlining where to start with the block, I was forgetting to keep in mind the 3-dimensional nature of it, and was accidentally creating more of a 2-dimensional sketch on the outside, which I encountered as a problem as I started carving. And it was interesting because you have to twist your mind. I had to twist my mind around the concept that it exists within space, and you have to think ahead in the process of creation so that you don't get yourself stuck.
Yeah, I think that's an ongoing issue for most people. Is you have to get to a certain place in order to be able to see in 3D, and it isn't always successful. And I'm glad you were able to deal with that process, even though it was a challenge initially. Very good. Who would like to go next?
I can go.
I can go next.
You guys want to duke it out, and whoever wins gets.
You can go. I can go after you.
Okay, so yeah, I also think my biggest challenge was like trying to think in
what's your
3D
name?
and oh, Karen. Yeah,
Okay,
especially in
sorry,
the
Karen. Sometimes when people talk, the Teams doesn't show me who's talking. That's why I'm asking. So thank you
oh,
for your.
it's okay.
All right. So biggest challenge.
Yeah, so I think my biggest challenge was also just trying to think ahead and in like a 3D way because you have to think about all the sides and all the angles, especially like the carved biomorphic abstraction because you can't really add back onto it. It's all subtracting, so you really have to plan ahead. So yeah, that was probably one of my biggest challenges.
All right. Excellent. And then who would like to go next?
I can go.
Okay. Your name?
Hazel.
All righty.
So for me, it was probably the scale of the projects because I've worked with most of the materials before, but I've always worked really small. So it was a challenge for me to make everything bigger than I instinctually want to make it. Learning how to plan that out and organize it. I think that was my biggest challenge.
What kind of problems did you have expanding the size of something? Were they structural or principally design?
Most of it was principally design. Some of it was structure, like with the wire. It's a lot easier for things to balance on little points or smaller points when they're smaller, but when they're bigger, they tend to collapse a bit more.
Right.
So I think, yeah.
All right, good. Who would like to go next? We have Cassidy and James left.
I'll go again. This is
Okay.
James. I saw one of the biggest struggles for me sometimes was I would have a great idea, and it would be easy for me to like do it like drawing or whatever, but 3D wise, since I'm not very experienced with it, sometimes my idea would not go the way I would exactly intended to, such as for like the sculpture specifically. Like I had an idea the whole time and it turned out to be completely different, which could be good and or bad, but yeah, usually I can manipulate it exactly the way I would want to, as I would probably with 2D design.
All right. So having to shift meant quite a much larger expenditure of effort than what you're used to.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. All right, and then Cassidy, what was your biggest challenge?
For me, my biggest challenge was probably with the wire sculpture piece because just it seems like no matter what I did, like the wire was just not looking the way I wanted to, so I kept adding more and more, and then it ended up like I'm happy with how it turned out, but it ended up looking a little bit messy and tangled. So
I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. I think just because of the nature of the shape of wire, sometimes it looks really good to be messy and tangled. You know, it's.
I suppose you've
So
got a point there.
Yeah, well, you know, sometimes it does. Sometimes it's really nice to have it very clean. Excuse me, my throat got really dry there. That's a shock. We're in Utah. But I really appreciate you guys talking about these challenges, because it's what's interesting to me as everybody was talking, you couldn't help but also to describe what you did to overcome the challenge. And I think that's a mark of your capacity as an artist. You look at somebody like Jean-Claude and Christo. I can't imagine how many challenges that they had preparing to wrap the Reichstag, which was, I think, one of the most powerful works that they've done. And at no point did they give up. They just kept pushing. And I think that the Reichstag happened after they had been pushing for it for well over 20 years. And it's astounding to me that that is one of their most powerful works, and it was also one of the ones that was the most challenging for them to get done. So, and I like I said, I think it's interesting that all of you mentioned a challenge and then also mentioned how you overcame it. There are a couple things before we go to the greatest successes. There are a couple things that I wanted to talk about. First is, over the next couple days, I would like everybody to look at where they are absence-wise. I gave everybody that list a while ago, and of which days they missed. Be aware of that. We can't attend different sections anymore because class is over, but feel free to watch the videos from the other section of class, from the morning section, and to watch the videos from our section as well. And send me the code words so that you get the absences taken care of. That, I think one of the things that's frustrating to me is to see kind of the level of work that somebody is doing, and they don't get all the credit they deserve because they haven't been able to attend as much as they wanted to, or get those videos taken care of so that their absences were countered. So again, you can do the 3 absent makeups, and you can also watch both the videos for the class that you've missed from our section and videos from the other section. And when you let me know about them, just remember to tell me which days you want them to take care of. And if you don't remember which days specifically, just let me know that you want it the earliest day that you can. And I'll just go through and whittle those down. There's been a couple people that have been doing that and have really come a long way in taking care of their absences. So I want to make sure that everybody's aware of that, for one thing. And second, I'm kind of shocked because Canvas is still allowing people to put things on. And I think that I'm really grateful for that. If you're at a point where you have finished a project and Canvas will no longer allow you to upload it, please email it to me. Everybody has my email. Email it to me directly, and I will plug it in for you. And we have until May 6th to get all of that taken care of. Another issue is if anybody's having problems doing the video of their PowerPoint, their informal presentation, or their artistic critiques, let me know. There have been a couple people where their systems just kept crashing, and we'll do everything we can to take care of that. So again, you get all the credit that you've earned. All right. Okay. With that being said, let's go through now and have everybody talk about the biggest successes that they had during the term.
I'll go first.
All right.
Biggest success. So I think this latest project for me was the biggest success. It was the wrap project. And it was like the creative floodgates had just opened. And I almost immediately knew what I wanted to do and how to do it. And the fun thing was that the project worked out very well. I liked the results. I think I liked them a lot better than the things I ended up covering. And it was fun because I also realized there was another thing I could do. So there were little like ceramic figures that you can paint from like Color Me Mine, that kind of a thing. They were older, they weren't very well done, they're from my childhood. One of them was a horse. And I realized during the project, because I was covering some penguins and balloons, that if you just take the hot glue, you can outline and just web over the entire thing, cut it free, glue it back together, and it has this perfect sculptural outline of what you cocooned. And I made one of those, and that was just a fun little side thing to do as part of the project. And it opened my eyes that there are so many possibilities when it comes to working with like three-dimensional space.
All right, excellent. I would like to see that, what you did. If you wouldn't mind emailing that or sending it to me, that'd be really interesting to see.
Yeah, I can do that.
All right, I'd appreciate that. Who else would like to be next, or who would like to be next talking about their greatest success?
I'll go.
Oh.
Ha, fight me, Taylor. I think, okay, first of all, I don't think much of my work was successful. So I think honestly, like
I
biggest
disagree.
success.
Before you continue, I disagree.
I was gonna say the same.
Me too.
Well, let me say my piece first, and then you can prove me wrong. I think honestly, like the biggest success for me was just showing up, as weird as that may sound, because there were plenty of times where I just didn't want to come to class, but I did, and I always like got something out of it, and it was always like really good conversation or really good concept that I got to learn. And so, what is the quote of like 90% of life is just showing up?
That's what Woody Allen said. Over 90% of success is showing up.
Yeah, so I think that was like my success story, that I showed up.
I think that's an interesting perspective, because it makes me also wonder how many lost possibilities, how many lost opportunities for growth, and how many lost experiences do we have when we decide not to show up. I think that's kind of a almost a sad way to win, but because the bar doesn't sound like it's very high, but it sounds like that. But I think it's not. I think that's a really solid observation, because sometimes real success comes not directly from showing up on a particular day, but from the cumulative effect of building a habit of showing up. So I think that's a really good observation.
I've won an intramural basketball championship just by showing up, and nobody else did. So, yeah, think about that one.
Big plus. Tim what's his name? Guy who wrote 4-Hour Workweek. Tim
Ferriss. Tim
Ferriss.
Ferriss.
He became a national champion kickboxing, and I can't remember which country it was, but he found out in the rules that if during the bout the other one player leaves the playing surface, he gets kicked out of the ring, then the other person wins by default. So he trained for months on how to take punches and kicks, and then he became a national champion because he would just push these other fighters out of the boxing ring. And that's all he did. And it made a lot of people really angry at him, and he's not welcome in a lot of places in that country, but he found a way to win by showing up. But who would like to go next? What was your biggest success?
I can go.
All right.
I think my biggest success was just getting out of my comfort zone and out of my usual medium and exploring like my creativity in other ways. Like with all the different projects, pushing myself to make something that I wouldn't normally make. I think that was just my biggest success over the semester. And I had a lot of fun with the projects. I don't know how well they turned out, but it was fun when I did find the time to sit down and work, to like put on some music and then just put my sculptures together. So I really enjoyed just using my creativity in a different way than my normal.
when you are completely comfortable, what's the thing that you do? When you are at, Taylor, when you're at your most comfortable, what do you do?
Like, what do you mean?
Like you said you worked with media that with which you are not very comfortable at all, and it pushed you out of your comfort zone. I'd like to know where is your comfort zone located?
So, like my comfort zone, I like doing, like I mentioned, like I like watercolor and I like drawing out like my picture and knowing exactly what colors I'm putting where. And obviously, like sometimes it changes and I just go with the flow. But I think with this, like the skin and structure project, I had a lot of fun with because it was pushing my creativity with using like the wooden skewers and hot glue and trying to design and like using different materials to try to make the skin structure that I used for my piece. So I think just kind of that ability of using my creativity and like kind of problem solving ways for my sculptures, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so.
And like
So
with watercolor, like yeah, you can push the limits and stuff, but it's for me, I haven't pushed the limits with my watercoloring. And so I'm very comfortable with what I do with it. And I think also kind of going along with pushing my limits with the 3D stuff is it's made me understand that when you do push your limits, you can have really successful things. And so I think that's going to help me go to the next level with my watercolor because I won't be afraid to get out of that comfort zone that I felt when I was doing the sculptures. Is that making sense, or am I just like jumping from thought to thought?
I think that does make sense because you're dealing with that gateway into further possibilities, and that gateway is something that makes you uncomfortable, and pushing through that in the context of this class allowed you to do the projects, but you can take that awareness of the ability to push through that discomfort zone and push yourself in things that you are already familiar with and hopefully be more successful in them. So yeah, I think that made sense. I think those are good observations. Who would like to go next?
I'll go. This is Hillary.
All right.
I think one of the greatest successes for me was just actually devoting a good amount of time to making things, and because like I mentioned, like I haven't been in school, so it's super easy to not do anything and procrastinate and just like think that no idea is worth sitting down and actually trying to make it. But getting back into the practice of just doing something, anything, even if it's terrible, I think was really important for me. So now kind of, building up that habit put me in a better place for making stuff on my own. Just accepting like that it may not be great, but you're at least sitting down for a good chunk of time and doing something.
All right, good. I think that's really valuable. There is, and we'll talk about it in just a little bit, but I think there is something significant that takes place when you devote a chunk of time doing the same activity. I think that's a good observation. Who would like to go next?
I can go. So I found most of my successes when I just kept trying, when something wasn't working out, but I just kept trying. Like with the structure with skin and the wrapped object, I had a good idea of what I wanted to do, but the materials that I was using or trying just weren't really working. But I just kept trying, kept looking for new materials, and eventually it worked. But also something I wanted to share was with the wire sculpture, like I said, I really struggled with that one, and one of the structure I ended up making was this leaf, but it just did not work. It wasn't looking good. Like in person when you're holding it, just doesn't look very good. But then I took a picture of it and actually ended up looking really cool in the picture. So I thought that was an interesting, unexpected success that I had.
It kind of makes me feel sad because the 3D thing itself wasn't what was cool. It was the 2D representation of it. No, but that is interesting how perspective, just a slight shift in perspective can change how you address something or feel about something.
For sure.
That's very interesting. All right, who would like to go next?
I can go
I
next.
can go next. So I just wanted to talk about like the cardboard assignment and the wrapped and cocooned object.
Okay, and who is this?
This is Keely.
Okay, Keely.
So, with those projects to prepare for them, I had been gathering things like the whole semester because I knew I would be doing them. So, like, I gathered cardboard boxes and, different materials. And it was actually kind of funny because one of our rooms in our apartment was just full of, I guess you could say, garbage that I ended up just turning into art. And it really opened up my eyes to just the possibilities that are out there for art. Like, I am not limited to just one medium or material, and that I can literally just like walk outside and pick up materials and use them in an artistic way. And that was just like really eye-opening to me in like my own creative process. And like, I don't know, giving me a little bit more desire to put 3D objects more into my 2D art, to make it more interesting. So it will be kind of cool to see how I might progress and change in my artistic style because of this class.
That's really interesting. While you were talking, I was thinking of there's an artist named Rauschenberg who would go for walks around his apartment in New York, and he would collect trash in alleys and behind buildings, things like that. Sometimes he would have a geographical area to walk through and pick up trash. Sometimes he would be just wandering. Sometimes he would give himself a time limit. And then he'd bring these things back to his studio apartment, lay them out, and then put these, only way to describe it is 3D collages together that juxtapose, that, he put these apparently random objects together in a specific way, being very aware of the connotations and narratives people would apply to these different objects, because the objects by themselves were very comfortable and familiar, each individual one, but when layered on top of each other, they became something completely new. And it's fascinating to me to see what artists like yourself do with material that everybody else assumes is just garbage. And I think it's fascinating. Yeah, you can one person can throw it away, but everybody else who sees that thing, maybe it reminds them of stories in their own lives, or makes them think particular things, or forces reactions. And so I think that's really a worthwhile observation. Thank you. Who would like to go next?
I'll go. This is Brinley.
Okay.
So I actually think that my best success was actually probably my carved biomorphic abstraction, just because I felt like it was the most difficult and had the most potential to fail. I'm still like working on it and sanding it down, so nobody has like really seen it yet. But when we first started working with the material, I was terrified that I was just going to split my plaster like right down the center, like right in half, and totally destroy it. So I was actually really proud of myself because like every move that I made, I felt like it was intentional. I don't feel like I had any instances where I was like, oh shoot, I didn't mean to like knock that off or anything like that. So I was actually like really like just proud of myself and like surprised that I could work with this material And I was literally just like, man, I feel like freaking Michelangelo right now, like being able to like carve this right now. So I think that it was just like really cool to like just be able to see what I was able to do. And it was also one of the materials that I have like never done anything like it before. Like I've done like a huge Millennium Falcon out of cardboard. I've done stuff with wire. I've done stuff with other things. So this was like one of the materials where I have absolutely done nothing like it. So I think it was really fun and just, I think there's success in trying hard things, even though if it's not the prettiest. I think just the process and like having that confidence and just seeing what I can do, I think that's where I found the most success.
I like that. That's a really good observation. I try to hide it from you guys, but every time something broke or something snapped off of somebody's sculpture, it made me want to throw up because I know how difficult this is, and stuff like that just sucks profoundly. So I really hope that everything continues to work out for you.
I know, fingers crossed. I'm not jinxing myself.
Yeah, that is kind of scary. But what also is amazing to me is every single person in this class, when something did not go the way you wanted, you took a moment to get irritated about it, and that's completely appropriate. But then you turned around and addressed it again and took care of the issue. And I think that shows, like I've said before, a certain level of professionalism, and I really appreciate that. All right, who would like to go next? Greatest success.
I'll go.
All right. What's your name?
Alyssa.
Okay. I'm sorry, Alyssa. Yeah, you're one of the people that I could see on the screen, but every time you say, the little mute thing still shows up, so I have no idea who's talking.
Oh. So my greatest success was the biomorphic abstraction 2, and I think I was really passionate about that one. Like I had a vision of exactly like what I wanted it to be, but by the time we had started that, I kind of had realized like, okay, I need to not be so tense about what it's going to end up as, and but I was really excited for it, and so I did a lot of preparation, I guess, in order to do it as well as I could. And so I actually did something I was more comfortable with. I went home and used some clay and tried to like figure out exactly how it would look in the end, because looking at the block was really daunting for me, because I was like, I don't even know where to start. How am I supposed to know where to start if I don't know where I'm going? And so I kind of used that to figure out where I was going and use that as an example as I was carving. And so it really helped for me to put something in perspective of, like, this is what I know I can do, and then let's use this to create it in a new setting. And so that actually helped me be much more successful with it, because I had an image of what I wanted it to be. And it was still kind of hard, like going through it and being like, I don't know how I'm going to be able to do this without like messing something up along the way and chipping off the wrong part. But then I would just remember, like, it's okay if I do, I'll just change the outcome a little bit. And so that ended up being really successful for me, is being able to like let loose and have like my plan, but know that my plan might not work out.
You know, that's a really good insight. I really appreciate that, because we get very attached to our plans, and being able to have that flexibility, I think, adds another level of just interesting, something interesting in the work that we do. Somebody told me that we get attached to the work that we make, but that doesn't mean it's our baby. And sometimes we forget that. We build something, we spend hours and hours and hours on it, and if it doesn't work out the way we're expecting, that doesn't mean it's a failure, and it doesn't mean that we're throwing our baby away. What it does mean is that it's a success, just not in the way that we expected, because we're learning something different. And so I really appreciate your ability to pivot when things didn't work exactly the way that you were expecting, hoping, or wanting them to. So very good. Who would like to go next?
I can go.
Okay, and what's your name?
Sage, yeah. For me, my biggest accomplishment was being able to make pieces that I was actually really liked and I was proud of, even though they were nothing like I originally planned them to be. Because I found in most of them that something would happen or I just wouldn't plan it right. So then I have to take a different direction or change it up or do something different, which ended up changing it from what I originally planned. But I persevered through it and I was still able to make things that I really liked. And I think were probably even better than I originally planned them to be.
Right, excellent. I really like that observation too. It ties directly in with what Alyssa is saying, where you're forced to pivot, but that pivot becomes integral to the success of the final piece. That's really good. That's a good observation. All right, we have 4 more people left. James, Hazel, Hayden, and Cassidy. Who would like to go first out of those 4?
I'll go.
All right, and this is Hayden, right?
Yep. So for me, my success, it's a pretty simple one. It's also with the biomorphic abstraction. When we started that project, I was having a difficult time like trying to figure out what I would want to do with it. Because with every other project, I wanted to like map out every detail of how I was going to do it. But with this one, it challenged that because it, encouraged me, and pretty much I had to work with it as I went along with it. And I pretty much had to work within a flow and in a way kind of like listen to what the sculpture wanted to be instead of what I wanted it to be. So eventually, after a while, after working with it for so long, I was able to figure out what I wanted it to be after, spending a few weeks working with it.
That can be a scary transition between finding out that it's not going to do exactly what you want it to do, the medium, and then finding out how to reassess your expectations because of the possibilities of the medium, or due to the possibilities of the medium. That's really good. That's good too. Excellent. All right, who would like to go next?
I can go.
All right, and hold on a sec. This Hazel?
Yeah.
All right.
So for me, my biggest success is probably my change in perspective on abstract work. Because like before the semester, I'd look at an abstract piece and I'd just not understand the point of it. I'd look at it and go, why? And throughout the semester, I was able to gain a bit more perspective of, oh, okay, this is why this type of art is made and what kind of meanings these things can have. And so in addition to that, I think the project would probably be the biomorphic abstraction. That's when it really finally started to sink in. But yeah, I think my biggest success was that change in perspective.
I really appreciate that. It seems that there are vitally important aspects of every kind of art, I think. And realism, a lot of us, our livelihoods depend on how we access realism in light of the expectations and desires of our clients. But sometimes it seems that you can broaden the audience. Ironically, you can broaden the audience of people that will appreciate or get something out of what you're doing when you open yourself up to abstraction a little bit. I just think that that's really interesting observation. So good. Who would like to be next? We're down to James and Cassidy.
I could go next.
Okay.
And like writing off the last one, like doing kind of like a lot more abstraction, which is like more like something I'm not used to, like really opened myself up more to it. Because like for some like the artists we've even looked at, like some of them were like just incomplete images that we had to like finish with our own minds. like the way some sculptures were formed, and that like opened me up to that idea and gave me a bigger appreciation for abstract design.
That's a really good observation too. I think one of the ways for a work of art to feel complete, and I'm not talking about that we're looking at it and we think it feels complete. I'm talking about from the perspective of the artwork, how it feels complete is really having an audience to appreciate it and to finish the narrative somehow. And exploring abstraction allows us to create something that it's a little bit stronger than just an invite. It kind of forces the audience to participate in the creation of whatever we're building. That's a really valuable observation. Thank you. And Cassidy, what was your biggest success from the semester?
For me, I'd say probably my carved biomorphic abstraction was my best success. I wasn't really sure where I was going with it when I started, but then the longer I worked on it, I just liked it more and more. And then the colors in, because mine was the one that had the swirls and then like the colors and the grooves, and those were completely just like a spur of the moment. I picked up all the spray paint cans I had in like the area where I was at, and then I went and spray painted them, and the colors just kind of dripped through those cracks. And so I, went with what was working and pushed it a little further, and it ended up looking really nice. And so I'm really happy with that project in particular.
That's good to hear, because it sounds like at the beginning it was really intimidating. And when you finally threw off that kind of lead weight of intimidation, it sounds like you freed yourself to do something that now you're happy with.
Yeah, that's definitely what happened.
All right, that's exciting. There's another thing that I wanted to talk or remind everybody about again, and then I wanted to get invite some comments from people. I have graded everything that's been turned in to date. There might have been some other things this afternoon, like 1 or 2 items that were turned in, or 3. And I am trying to stop what I'm doing and get those graded just as soon as I see them, if it's at all possible. But if there are things like you notice that there's, like you missed 8 points on a quiz, and you want to get those points, you don't. I was asking people just to go ahead and retake the quiz, but I don't think you need to do that. If you want to, just add to the comments saying, I want to update my answer on this, I'm going to write more about this, or this is what I actually think about that, then I can go through and make those changes as well. And if you do that, Canvas is supposed to automatically alert me that you've made a change, but that doesn't always seem to work. So when you do readdress assignments or reassess something or resubmit something, please email me and let me know, and then I will go in and readjust the grade. Does everybody understand that? All right, good. Now, at the very beginning of the term, I talked about why the particular amount of hours for each assignment are important. Does everybody remember those discussions at the beginning of the term? For some people, it's as little as 45 minutes. For most of us, it's closer to an hour and a half or a little bit longer, where we start getting into the flow, where the mundane things that we normally pay so much attention to start to drift away, and we lose a sense of time and space and context as we kind of dive deep into whatever it is that we're doing. I would like to hear from some people who has felt that shift where they dropped into the flow. I'm talking about an experience specifically from this semester, and I'd like you to share just what the circumstances were and how that made you feel, and whether or not that affected the work that you were doing. Who would like to talk to that?
Sorry, could you repeat it one more time?
Yeah, where I would like to hear from some people who noticed the shift in perspective when they got into that flow state, and not necessarily paying attention to right at the transition, but when you look up and realize that all of a sudden it's 4 o'clock in the morning and you've been sitting there working for the last 6 hours on the same thing. And I'd like you to kind of describe what that feels like and whether that was a benefit to whatever it was that you were working on, or if it was a benefit to your experience as an artist.
Oh, I can.
I'm sorry? Sometimes I'll be working on projects, and it's not all the time. It's not always the project that I'm particularly excited about. Sometimes I will do projects specifically to address skills and help me develop skills. Well, I can go on. Delane, do you want to share?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, with just that initial stage, I'd start and I kind of get nitpicky with all these little things, or I'd get frustrated because it's not going the way I want it to. But after, I would notice an initial change after like 35, 45 minutes of working on it, where I'd just get into that groove where I'd stop caring. Okay, maybe this isn't working, whatever, I'll try something else. And it just, yeah, it became more of a process, and it'd start working, just start clicking.
Was it clicking because things actually worked out, or was it clicking because you stopped caring about it? Oh no, we lost her.
I think for me, like experiencing flow is really hard when I'm not familiar with the process or the medium. Like when my mind is so focused on trying to figure out how things are working or what to do, then flow like never happens. And so I can't necessarily like think of an instance this semester where I did experience a flow state, because I had my mind like so fixated on just trying to figure out the minimum viable product that I could produce. Just because this isn't my really chosen medium. And so I could transition from like doing work here to doing work that I'm more comfortable with and experience flow there. But like with carving plaster, that was monotonous, but not flowy.
Did you experience flow in any of the other classes you were working with?
Yeah, so I do a lot of like 3D modeling. And when I'm doing modeling or texturing, that's like kind of when I can thrive, because I understand more of the mechanics. And there's definitely other times when the model's just not working and it's being ridiculous, and that is not flowy. That is very unflowy. But in that instance, since I'm more familiar with the program, or just maybe because it's something that I'm more committed to in the sense of like my future career, I would say that flow is more likely to happen, because I know that like in order to be a good creative, I need to be actively seeking out a flow state, because that's when like the best ideas come, or that's when my true like process and skill actually comes through, and I can get an accurate gauge of how good I actually am.
All right, excellent, very good. Delane, you were talking about getting to a point where it starts clicking, and my question to you was, do you think it's clicking because you figured it out, or is it clicking because you said the other thing was you got to a point where you just stopped letting it worry you so much?
I think it was a little bit of both. I mean, when working on it and working through the problems I had, something kind of clicked a little bit. I was like, okay, I think this is where I want to go. And whether or not it exactly works out, I'm just going to keep pushing through it. And I think where that it also comes, stop caring about the little nitpicky stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think that's worthwhile. That's a good observation. And then with Evan, I think there is really something to that. There's details can be an enemy to flow. You know, when we're so concerned about getting it right, whatever that may mean, or concentrating on the specific process. And one thing you said that motivates you to get into a state of flow is, you know, is this going to be beneficial to where I'm to my future? And I wonder if is flow then for you, is that a state where you are comfortable with what you're doing, or when you decide that it is worthwhile to be comfortable with what you're doing?
I don't know.
Because it sounds like that flow state comes in when you're doing either one of those.
Yeah, no, now that you say it like that, I think you're right. But I think there's a distinction. Because there's like trying to experience flow out of necessity, which comes from the understanding of like it's worthwhile, so I should be like seeking out the flow state. But there's also the experiencing flow just because I am comfortable in what I'm doing. And so I think both, but maybe they're interrelated. Like I'm comfortable with what I'm doing because I know that it's important.
I'm probably gonna make another comment against him.
I don't know.
No, I think that's a good thing to consider, and I think it's completely valid. There are times when I'll get really enamored with a project and I'll just kind of dive into it, and my wife calls it diving into my navel. Everything else kind of disappears. And there are other times when I'll be working on something specifically to grow skill or to address a need for a skill. And then I'm concentrating on the details like you're talking about, and then something shifts to the point where I start enjoying working with those details. And it's hard to explain, but then the flow comes because it's exploring the process and kind of losing myself in the process. But I think that's interesting. Now,
do you feel like? Oh, sorry.
No, go for it.
I was gonna say, do you feel like if you're dealing with a particularly difficult client to work with, that like that they're making changes that will essentially like ruin the piece, or they just have bad taste? Is it possible for you to experience flow when that's the situation? Like, can you still make stained glass that you can make effortlessly, or because there's so much other noise, does it kind of impede the flow in general?
Well, because it's a business, there are some things that I can do that limit how much a customer can ruin things. But I don't feel that flow until I get to a point where the customer finally gives me the full parameters. And once I understand what the full parameters are, once I've got to go ahead on this iteration of the design, and these are the colors I'm using, then I can switch off my awareness of that annoyance and get into it just from exploring the medium. And but that can be a really difficult thing, because if I'm more worried about the changes that the customer might want to make, it is almost impossible to feel any level of satisfaction or enjoyment with what I'm doing. And I think that all of you have had that experience where you've had the worst customer to have ever been born, and experienced that negativity for just at least a little while. And it really sucks, for lack of a better word. Now, Brindley, were you saying something about flow as well?
Yeah,
Earlier?
sorry, I didn't realize my mic was on. I'm so sorry. But yeah, I'd like to comment on that as well. I think for me, I actually feel like I hit flow pretty quick with all different types of art. So I think I'm really lucky in that way. But I think coming out of flow, it's kind of frustrating because I'm like, oh shoot, like I've been doing this for a long time. And then I'm like, okay, like why is it kind of not done? But then also, like, I don't know, flow is just so cool because I think that's when I think about my pieces the deepest. And I think, like, what does this piece mean to me? What is the underlying message? And how could this be interpreted? And so I really love kind of that discovery process. Sometimes I don't know what my pieces mean until the end of it. And then I'm like, oh, this kind of resembles this. And my brain just kind of like trails and trails and trails. And so I don't think it's like a numb zoning, but more of like a fueling my brain type of zoning is kind of what I experience when I have flow. So yeah, I just really enjoy it. I enjoy just kind of discovering the piece in a different, more theoretical and deeper way as you're working on it a little bit longer.
Is theoretical the best word, or does it become something in the realm of metaphysical?
Yeah, probably all. It's like spiritual, theoretical, and physical. Like all of it, I think is. I don't know if that really answers your question, but
No, I think that's really good. It's art is one of those things where it can become a language to itself, and the vocabularies of art are immense. One thing that continually amazes me is there were things 20, 30 years ago that I could not stand. And as I learn about the artist, or as I learn about the context, or as I just see other things and travel and meet other people, if I return to those things, most of the time I realize I've gained an appreciation for them. And it's not because that thing has changed. Well, in one aspect, in one portion, it has. It's changed quite a bit. But the biggest change has occurred in my capacity to understand the vocabulary and to appreciate what that thing was, or what that thing still is. And I say it has changed because art that's experienced doesn't really ever get completed. It becomes something new through the process of our experiencing it. And so I think that art will continue to live and evolve and grow as we do the same thing, which I think is a fascinating concept. And we can argue with that, saying, well, the object is still the object. Well, yes, it is, but with humans, as humans, we're not just machines. We think as well, and we have imagination. And so when we interact with something differently, it, in a very fundamental sense, changes what that thing is at its core as well, because we've changed. And I think that's just really fascinating. That art objects aren't just stagnant things. They aren't just static, but they morph and change and grow just as we do when we observe them and when we grow ourselves. So I just think that's fascinating.
I have a comment.
Yeah.
So I first learned about flow, or the flow state, actually when I was in one of the color guard teams I was on. And I'd never really experienced it before, but there was this time where we were performing. It was our first performance on the team, and we all came off the floor and we were like, holy crap, that felt really slow. Like the music was so slow, everything was going by so slow. I had to control myself so much because I'm not used to that. And so we talked to the staff about it, and they're like, that was the same music. And one of our staff members was like, you guys hit the flow state, which is like when you're really in the flow, the time around you just seems so slow compared to what it is in reality. And I really noticed that in doing the artwork when I hit flow state as well, and kind of that sense of like you're in it and then all of a sudden you look up and all this time has gone by. It's because when you're in the flow state, like you feel like super connected with whatever you're doing, that time literally feels like it's slowing down. And that was just really interesting to see, like being able to recognize when I'm in the flow and when I'm not, because time feels like it's going by so much slower.
I really like that. I think it was either Einstein or one of his contemporaries who said that time is a fiction, but it's a useful fiction. And I think that there's something to that. I mean, we use time to structure our awareness and our lives. And then when we really connect with ourselves and connect through that flow state, time is one of those things that just simply disappears. I think that's a really good observation. Very cool. All right, well, we have 5 minutes left. Does anybody have any last questions or observations? I know that there's still a lot of stuff that needs to be turned in with everybody. Who still has either presentations or critiques to record and send in? All right. Okay. I would really appreciate it if everybody here would just commit to checking on that YouTube channel at least once a day through May 6th. And if you see any new videos, watch them so that the person gets all the views. And I'm particularly talking about the research PowerPoints videos. Please double check, share them with your friends, share them with the people you don't even like, just so that people can get the views that they need. And again, if you guys are having any issues with uploading anything, just email it to me directly. And let me know remind me which assignment it's for and everything, and I'll do my best to take care of it. But I've really appreciated working with you guys this semester. It's been a lot of fun to see the stuff that happens and the stuff that you guys come up with. And it's really cool to see. I can see a lot of the times when people are struggling with a medium, and then, like Delane was saying, something clicks, and suddenly everything is great. And ideally that means you're happy with it too. But I really appreciate that. We have time just for 2 comments. How do you think this class is going to affect what you do in the future? You know, addressing 3D design. How is it going to affect what you do in the future?
Just for me, this class really opened up my mind to, I don't know if this is a really great answer, just sculptures in photography. I had no idea that there was so much art that lived in photography. It was people made these sculptures, but then they survived, they lived on in these photos. So that was really interesting to me, learning that whole new aspect of art, basically.
And there's like 4 that I could think of right off the top of my head, but it's absolutely fascinating. Because you are a photographer, aren't you?
No, not me. No, I wish.
Okay. But yeah, it's really interesting seeing the juxtaposition of 2 ways of looking at things: sculpture, and then typically we don't associate photography with something other than relating images around us. You know, creating that built environment specifically to photograph it, and then that becomes the product. I think that's really an interesting way of dealing with stuff. So yeah, very much. Anyone else?
I think I definitely just gained a deeper appreciation for abstract art. I don't think it was something that was really on my radar before. So through this class and a couple other classes, I think it is interesting to see like what abstract art brings to the table, and that sometimes like in real life, like realistic things can't convey like feelings and things like that because they're not tangible. So I think that's been really interesting to learn, and something that I want to take a little bit more into my work and kind of think more about how you show feelings in your work type thing. So
that's an excellent observation, and I really appreciate that awareness of just something new to use in your toolbox of observation. I think that's great. Well, guys, it's been a pleasure working with you all semester. Again, we have 6 more days to get stuff finished. If you have any questions, email me, and I will answer just as soon as I can. I think last night, some emails I answered at like 2 o'clock in the morning because I still happen to be up. But keep going, and if you're all done, that's great. You can sit on your hands for the rest of the week. But I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Don't get too stressed. And I will look forward to meeting you all again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We'll see you guys.
Have a good one.
You too.